evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Joy Trip Reading Project book discussion. I'm your host, James Edward Mills, and today I'm pleased to introduce this month's guest, Baratunde Thurston, and we're going to talk about his book, How to Be Black, but we're also going to be exploring his new PBS documentary television series called America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston. Now, before we get onto our discussion, I want to make sure that we acknowledge that I am screening into you tonight from Madison, Wisconsin, which is the ancestral homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place known for time immemorial as Date Job. Now, wherever you are in North and South America, please take a moment to recognize the native people that once called the place you now live home. Now, I'd also like to thank the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for their support for this and other discussions on the Joy Trip Reading Project. I'd also like to thank the financial support for contributors, including the Schleck Family Foundation, the National Geographic Society, the National Park Service, and Together Outdoors, because they provide us with a small amount of funding so that we can pay our speakers a small stipend, because I believe that friends don't let friends work for free. Now, for those of you who not be familiar with me, my name is James Edward Mills, and I am a freelance journalist and independent media producer, again, based in Madison, Wisconsin. And I have a specialty in covering areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the conservation and preservation of public land. I teach a class here at the University of Wisconsin called Outdoors for All. And the titles that we talk about on the Joy Trip Reading Project are actually part of our reading list. And the discussions that we have are an opportunity for us to speak to the very general audience about the contributions of Black and Indigenous people, as well as other people of color, in the experience of a public land, both in the natural world, and as we share this through memoir and through academic research. Our guest this evening, Baratunde Thurston, tells us a better story of us. And I love how he puts that together, because he basically traces threads of technology and democracy, climate, and through his work as an Emmy award-winning host, producer, and writer and public speaker, he is the producer of the PBS documentary series America's Outdoor America with Baratunde Thurston, and he's also the creator and host of the podcast How to Citizen. And it is also named as Apple's favorite podcast of 2020. And I'm very happy to introduce to you my good friend, Baratunde Thurston. Baratunde, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, James. Hello, book club. Reading is fundamental. Yay.
Yay. Critical, in fact. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. And first of all, tell us where you are right now.
I am in a tower in Midtown Manhattan, Grand Central Terminal, 43rd Street and Madison Avenue, on the island of Manhattan, traditional home of the Lenape people. And yeah, I'm in town here. Been here for 2 weeks, over 2 weeks, longest time in New York since living in New York. 4 years ago, I left for Los Angeles. And I've been here to do promotion for America Outdoors, to build some coalitions around the How to Citizen work, to see some friends, and avoid enemies.
First of all, I'd like to talk to you about your book, How to Be Black. And I'm curious to know about the nature of the book itself. So I've been Black my whole life, and I really don't think I needed an instruction manual for How to Be Black. What prompted you to create this particular book?
Some of us needed a refresher course. You know, you're solid in your Blackness, and I'm very proud of you. I'm happy for you. Others, you have lapsing moments, you know. No, the book was a response to pressure from multiple directions, the attempts of others to define me, to define a lot of people who've been through experiences like mine, where in some moments you are too Black and a threat and other and all these things. In others, you're not Black enough and you're talking white and you're acting white because you like words or study or whatever the thing is that mainstream society says we're not supposed to be. And so this book was meant as a challenge to the very idea that there was a way to be Black, hence the ironic title. Spoiler alert, there's no way to be Black except every way that Black people are. But it was a good excuse to write a premature memoir as someone who was in his 30s when his book came out, and to talk to people about race and to have some fun. I weave a lot of jokes. It's a very satirical take on the topic of race, and try to explore this subject, which has befuddled this land from its settler days.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper in that. I mean, I'm curious to know, what is it that it means to be Black in America today? How is it that we are defining our identity as a people, as Black Americans?
It's an evolution. I mean, I think for so much of our history here, we were not allowed to define ourselves. That the things that defined us as we arrived / were brought here were taken. Our language was taken. Our religion was taken. Our customs were taken. Most of our foods were taken. Our drums and music were taken, and our very family members were taken. That was America's business model, was to take things from Black people and from Indigenous people. And so our the destruction of our identity is part of America's identity. And that's a tricky thing. America's identity itself is also in part defined by not being things. Not being British is like our founding document, like this Declaration of Independence. That king is whack. He's charging too much tax. So definition and ID are like so much of the American constant question. Who are we? What are we? We're not a single religion. We're not a single race. We're not a single language. So the Black identity, I think, is impossible to start to think about and talk about without putting it in the context of the attempts to destroy that constantly over hundreds of years by American money and might, and the need to extract value from people and places and things. So we have had to adapt. We have had to hide. We've had to use subterfuge. We've had to improvise. We've had to encode our identities in our foods, in our dances, in our songs. And so we've been very creative in response to the attempt to destroy. Life finds a way. Thank you, Jurassic Park. Applies to people as well. And so for our people, our insistence on existence is a part of our identity. And that improvisation and adaptation is really dope. It's blues and hip hop and all kinds of artistic forms that are very popular and known. And today, I'd say Black identity is moving through some phases. We've had a period of time where it was shame. Right? A period of time where there was nothing we weren't allowed to have, and we had to hide. A period of time where it was shame because you was always a slave and wasn't going to be nothing but a slave, and you were dumb and you were a brute. And like America invested so much in telling us how little we are while depending so much on how strong we are. Right? A lot of self-hate going on there, a lot of confusion. And then I think there was a lot of times where we were, as Black people, not just in response to the America thing, but proud, but also lost, angry, shamed, broken. And what I perceive now is this transition into it's everything cyclical. We've had Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. We had Pan-Africanism. We had Africa with a K. We had the Black arts movement. Like there's nothing is entirely new, but right now there is a resurgence and a appreciation for joy. Hello, Joy Trip Project, right? Not the Trauma Trip Project, right? There's the idea that we would just have to like slap ourselves on the back with chains and sing Negro spirituals to the end of our days is done. Anybody trying to live like that? And but at the same time, we acknowledge that and then live into a reason to live, which is not merely to remember painful pasts, is to enjoy the now. So I see a lot of and experience a lot of Black people's identity now being about joy, being about healing, being about expression, being about wildly liberative, and also much more holistic and encompassing of all of the nooks and crannies within the Black community itself. You know, Black trans lives and Black indigenous and Black people in nature and Black science, Wakanda, you know, which is fictional, but then the celebration of our true diversity and genius in all these ways. So I feel it as a very positive time in the midst of what's always a challenging time for as long as we're on this land in the United States of America. This place is going to always be a challenge for us, and we're going to always rise to that and get creative. But right now, if I put a pin on it, I'd say we are in this joy and healing thing as a predominant mode of Black identity, at least as far as I can see. Hashtag not all Black people, asterisk, I don't speak for everybody. Oh,
Okay, I'm muted, so sorry about that. I love that one of the things that you do in the book is you talk very clearly about the various roles that Black people play. And one of my favorite chapters in the book was how to be the Black friend. You know, and I think that really speaks to, you know, I think a certain amount of authorship and ownership of our own presentation of how we put ourselves out into the world, especially in a world where we're being asked to behave or even to perform in a particular way. How do you think it is best for us as Black people, as people of color, to be ourselves in the broader world? How do we be proactive and productive citizens who just happen to be Black?
Yeah. It's a conundrum, dude. I would love to say, just like, be your authentic Black ass self all the Black ass time. But that can be dangerous, you know? And I think we have to do this contrary, paradoxical thing where we have to, you know, dance like nobody's watching, and they're always watching because we're good at dancing, not all Black people, while also being careful about our dance moves and being cognizant of the rooms that we're in and the spaces that we're in, indoor spaces, outdoor spaces. So we got to be like as free as can be and just be aware and be vigilant and not be naive because not everybody can handle our expressions of freedom, and they find themselves threatened because they themselves aren't free, and they kind of take it out on us. So they're unable to imagine that we could be this liberated. So to be Black now, and like advice around, you know, how do we express that and be that? I think artistically and paradoxically, I don't think it is wise to always be vigilant and head on a swivel and assume you're under the microscope and work twice as hard to get half as far. That is a 4x inefficiency on life. Just the mathematics of that advice is a lot of extra work. And if you're working 4 times as hard all the time, you're not enjoying. You're not joyful. You're not having rest. You're getting high blood pressure and gray hairs too soon and all sorts of disease because your CPU is overheating. And so we cannot be stuck in a sort of this high adrenaline, high blood pressure, stressful environment constantly. So we have to let go, you know, some of that vigilance and tap into an energy source that kind of transcends this world in many ways, that transcends the made up human rules in this land. One of those ways is to leave this land. I'm supposed to be talking to you from Paris. My plans changed. And not that France has got everything figured out, but as a Black American, it is less stressful. It can, in many departments, it can be less stressful for us there. And there's other places, you know, there's a whole continent where we're a majority. There's a lot of island nations where we're a majority. And so to also remind ourselves that our existence here in the United States is not the sum total of our possible existences, and that we have existed in the past and we will exist in the future in many different spaces and times, and we can kind of tap into that to find that wiggle room of freedom, and not just be a stress case all the time. Life's too short.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, one of the things that you just described is a recipe for exhaustion.
Yeah.
You know, and we can't be our best selves if we're tired. You know, if we're not being able to put ourselves out into the world in the ways that we most want to be. And one of the things that I found really liberating about How to Be Black as a book is that I think that it gives us permission to laugh,
Mm.
you know, not only at the circumstances, but in some cases ourselves. How much do you think humor is a part of being able to express a positive, proactive Black identity?
I think it's essential. I think we, as a part of our efforts to make a way out of no way, as we say, humor has helped, pave a way. It's just as a processing tool, as a way to try to make sense of things that make no sense. White supremacy makes no sense. It just is okay. So you telling me that God said, or cranial science said, or wait, what's the justification again? It keeps moving around, that you're just intrinsically better at everything that you happen to have control over, right? In this space time, okay, it's kind of insane. And there's been such a contortion of intellect and words and numbers to try to prove the rightful order and this kind of stack ranking of humanity. And it's not just Europeans who've done that, or people descended from Europeans who've done that. Humans do this stuff. All kinds of places as part of the world. It's crazy everywhere it happens. So humor as a way to try to explain the inexplicability of that, the unsoundness of it, can be helpful. I think there's an emotional release. Laughter is a physical process. It's a little bit of a workout. Jokes connect beyond just cognition and intellect. There's an emotion and a psychology that bypasses some of our defenses. And whether we're laughing at ourselves or laughing at the wider world, or encouraging the wider world to laugh at and with us, like, there's healing in that. There is connection in that. And there's so much disconnection in our history here, that to connect with ourselves and sense of pleasure through laughter is a really important thing. It's just really important to feel good and feel pleasure. And that's literally been outlawed, not just for Black people, like a whole gender. Like, women just aren't supposed to have pleasure. That's the law. The laws of men have dictated that. And we don't investigate it scientifically, and orgasms are like, that's whatever. So these things that are in How to Be Black, they apply to so many groups of us. It's my window at that time in my life to explore a big chunk of my own humanity, and that's a big feature of it. But it's not limited to that. So the humor also applies in that direction too. It's not just something that Black people can benefit from. But I think if you're ever in a stressful situation, like, humor is a natural antidote to stress. It is a release of stress, like a good massage, which I also endorse strongly.
Yeah, I too am a big believer in self-care. Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're talking about too is things that, really aren't funny at all.
Mm.
Specifically things like the conversation that we're having around critical race theory. And literal legislation being passed in states across the country where we are literally being asked not to talk about Black American history. That AP history in some high schools has been taken out, especially in Florida. Here in Wisconsin, we're literally being put under pressure here at the university to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion training and positions of of administration. You know, since your book has been written, this is a new conversation. You know, what do you think How to Be Black can speak to the current cultural, social wave of anti-education that is happening right now when it comes to issues of race and cultural and identity?
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck with that. That doesn't sound fun. I think this might be an illegal gathering as I look at the screen and these names. We're like a little sleeper cell hanging out in the woods somewhere under the cover of darkness. This what's happening right now has happened before. So it's not new. I'd love Battlestar Galactica, the series. There's this refrain in it, and there's like all of this has happened before, all of this will happen again. And I do not think that history is a circle entirely, but I think it's a spiral, and we revisit neighboring coordinates in a slightly different plane, but it echoes. There's a rhyme to it. So here we are in this verse again, and folks are outlawing DEI, CRT, well, ESG, a lot of letters being outlawed. It's gonna make Jeopardy very hard to play, because some of these letters getting real pricey. Got to get them off the black market. So there, I found a joke. It is funny. Look at that. Ha ha ha. The book doesn't have the perspective that I have today because it was written a long time ago and I'm older now. And so here's what I see with all this nonsense. There are folks who are manipulating people's fears for their personal, professional, economic gain. It is a tried and true strategy to tell people that their sense of loss, their sense of pain, their sense of exclusion is the fault of that group over there. We've been running that play since the game was invented. This game of life. And so here we go again. Oh, it's the Jews. It's the Jews that no. It's those witches. It was them witches it was the Hutus. Actually, it was it was the Irish. No, it was the Scott. Was it the Scots? It was the Protestants. No, it was the Catholics. Like, here we go again. So now our numbers come up again. It's them black. Well, now it's the woke people, which is just, it's like a nice way to say nigga. Like it's just nobody want to say it, but there we go. And I read this piece. Oh man, who was it? Clint Smith or A.D. Carson? No, it was neither. It was a piece, I think in a Rolling Stone. I put it in my newsletter 2 weeks ago, and they were just like, all of this activity around banning woke education, it just echoes with what the anti-civil rights people were up to, where it's like, oh, you're just a Negro lover, right? And you can't, during abolition, folks are being accused, and it was illegal for white folks to read abolitionist papers because you might start to see these brutes as human beings, and we can't have that. So what this, when you have folks in that position of power and they're policing not just us, but their own, they're afraid of their children learning about their failures. COVID was an interesting time because you had these kids being schooled at home and the parents is listening in. Wait, what do you say to my kid? Or, you had the kid learning stuff and then looking out the window and seeing shit on fire, seeing this officer murder George Floyd, and it's like this unimpeachable thing. And then the kid says, "Mommy and Daddy, why is that happening?" And the parents have no good answer. And if it's embarrassing to not have a good answer, it creates an emotion of shame and inadequacy. And immature people, regular people, most people, including me, don't react well to that position. Somebody tells me something I'm supposed to know, I get defensive immediately. and sometimes go on offense. Oh yeah, really? Well, what you know? You know, well, it was so and so's fault, and so you just try to deflect, and nobody trying to own it. And we have multiple generations of encouraging people not to own it. We've created fiction, all these Confederate statues celebrating treason, whole mythologies. We don't need Hollywood. Our history books have been filled with fiction for generations. People got elected on it, businesses made money on it, people kept their power on it. It's profitable. So there's a deep context to why we're here again. The newish perspective I have on what we could try to do about it. And I don't know if it'll work, but I think I understand some of the pain. I understand some of the shame. I understand some of the fear. And I want people to find a way to understand that we have to move through it. It's not just anti-Black or anti-woke, which is stupid. What you want to be? Are you pro-sleep? Like, what's the end game here? We have to stop this wokeness. I prefer to live in darkness and ignorance and go back to the cave. It's a pro-sleep agenda. That's the opposite of woke is sleep. What's your next move, homie? Okay, you win. You know less. Congratulations. How's your future going to play out? We cannot
it's
move
remarkable that
forward
you put
by
it
dumbing
that,
ourselves down. You know,
it's remarkable that you put it in that particular way. I don't
yeah.
know if you have just happened to listen to our discussion just last month. We were talking to Betty Reed Soskin, who is the oldest living national park ranger, and she retired 2 years ago at the age of 100. Tomorrow, she is 102. And in an interview with her years ago now, when she was a young 96, she described American history as an ever ascending upward spiral of chaos.
Yeah, I like her.
Okay, and it's in those moments of chaos where democracy is redefined. And she just illustrated what you just said, in that we've been here before. And we have these repeating patterns of inequity, and it happens again and again and over again, and here we are again.
So here's another way to talk about it. And we're gonna have to change that pattern by changing how we talk about it. Because how we talk about it is how we think it is. The stories we tell shapes the reality we live in much more than the opposite, I believe. That's why we can live in a fictional world of white supremacy. It's just a story that people sold or imposed, and it became law, which is itself a story. It became economic rules, which is just none of this is like physics. It's not absolutely scientifically true. It's just some stuff we said a lot to the point where we believed it was true. So here's a different truth. I'm gonna try to tell this kind of quickly, but I think the emotional journey is important. In COVID, I was thinking a lot and feeling a lot because I was stuck, physically unable to distract myself with travel and movement and work. And for my life, and in this book, I've celebrated my mother as incredible because she was. Baratunde Thurston was the greatest mother of all time, and that is a fact. That's scientific. That's very true. My mom just crushes all the moms here, and the moms before, the ones that produce you. My mom was better than all your moms. So we can establish that. We all agree. Thumbs up. Great. Now the problem is, she wasn't perfect, and I had spent a lifetime celebrating my mother. I documented her in this book. There's nothing critical about my mom in this book. It's kind of rare for a memoir. So I had a pause when I started finding things in myself in moments of silence and solitude that I didn't like. I was like, oh, where'd that habit come from? Where'd that pattern come from? What's going on here? And it's kind of inhibiting my current day relationships. And some of that traced back to my mom. And that was a very hard thing to wrestle with. As well, how could perfect mom do imperfect thing? Does not compute cognitive dissonance. Need whiskey, right? and tears and therapy and workouts and plank positions and everything, whatever coping style tools I could find, I was deploying them. And ultimately had to just acknowledge my mom was a person, a human being, very imperfect, couldn't teach things she was never taught, and cut her some slack and liberate her from this pedestal, free her from this cage and let her fly free, even though she's dead. And so freeing her from that little story of perfection freed me from certain expectations, allowed me to have some breakthroughs, and to recognize that loving my mother for most of my life, I thought meant being really grateful, meant being supportive, meant not adding to her burden, which I was so aware of, meant appreciating her and telling everybody how great she is. Number one son. I got she's number one, just at every game, metaphorical and actual. That's my mom. And that's not love. That's appreciation. But to love somebody is to really know them. And to know someone, you can't just know the highlight reels. You got to know the dark stuff too. That's true in family. It's true in chosen people in your life, kids, lovers, etc. And so I love my mom more now because I know her more now, even though she's not around to add more data. I was just able to reframe some things and reinterpret some things. And we got to do the same thing with our country. We got to love our country the way we love each other deeply, the way we love our mothers and our children and our siblings, our sisters and our brothers. And that involves knowing some stuff that's unflattering. Otherwise, we're just using people. You can't be with somebody just because they make you feel good about yourself. That's what we do with drugs. That's using someone. And a lot of people out here claiming to love America are just using America, wrapping themselves up in the flag. Patriotism is a substitute word for love. And love has as an essential component knowing. You cannot be patriotic and refuse to know your country. That is incompatible. That is something else. You are using a story of this country in a self-serving fashion. You are revealing your lack of faith in your own children to handle the truth. You are behaving in a most selfish fashion. We should want our kids to be better than us, to know things we don't know. That's how we move forward. You trying to hold your own kids back? That's very sad. And it's not crazy, and it's not stupid, but it is sad. And so we got to get to a point where some version of the tiny little breakthrough I had, and there's so many other versions, I didn't invent this, it's just the thing I happened to go through. And so it gave me a different way to empathize with and articulate what we need to collectively go through, which is to look at ourselves honestly, be willing to know ourselves. This goes for us as individuals too. There's stuff a lot of us walking around just all kinds of stuff in our closet, not want to look at it, and we act sideways. Why did James go off like that? Because James has some stuff to deal with. James ain't being honest with himself. Why is Baratunde? Because Baratunde's been hiding something from himself. So this works at every scale. The hyper-personal, individual, the interpersonal, and the collective. And folks got to get over this idea that being uncomfortable is some kind of death sentence. We don't have a right to perpetual comfort. Well, you might tell my kids something that might make them feel bad about their country's history. Why try anything? Why get up in the morning? You know what's uncomfortable? It's cold outside. This floor is chilly. That's uncomfortable. This water's too hot or it's too cold. The shower's too hot or it's too cold. Work, my job is uncomfortable. Applying pressure to the pedal in my car, pretty uncomfortable. Working out, uncomfortable. Why do anything? We cannot have the sole purpose of life to only experience comfort. That is a teeny tiny existence. And usually if we're pursuing that, we're imposing discomfort on others well out of our view. All these folks that don't want their kids to be uncomfortable, forcing other kids to be maximally uncomfortable. We grew up in an educational system as Black folk that was only uncomfortable. Wasn't nobody out there storming school board meetings for us, showing up with AR-15s, ranting and raving, temper tantrums galore on the floor of Congress. You're going to make my white child hate themselves. No, that's your fear. We're going to help them know us so we can all do better. And here's the extra freaking opportunity. People are so unimaginative, so afraid, they can only see downside in the near term. And the fact is, we need everybody. We need to understand as much of our collective selves as possible so we can collaborate as well as possible, so we can attack these problems and opportunities as effectively as possible. Climate change don't care if you ban critical race theory, but our species does care if you imprison millions of people with genius ideas just because they smoke some weed. And now we can't benefit from them. AI don't care. We got to figure out some things together, which means we got to know each other. We have to know ourselves. There is more opportunity and more money and more promise in this land if we pursue that path. But folks can't get over themselves, and it's not entirely their fault. The emotion, totally understandable. And then they're hearing stories from people making a lot of money, getting a lot of clout from ginning up this fear. They are not our friends. They are not your friends, and these people do not care about you. They're just acting out of extraordinarily narrowly defined self-interest, and it will lead to the destruction of many more of us. So we're going to do this one more time, again and again, or we're going to try something different. We're going to try actually loving our country, actually loving ourselves. I'd say we try love.
I could not possibly agree
Sorry
with
for
you
the
more.
speech.
And
That was
actually,
very
that's
long.
okay. And actually, I think that's an excellent segue. And it's really funny because, I know that you wrote the book a long time ago, but this is a reading club. So I figured let's talk about Baratunde's book. But what I really wanted to talk about was America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston, which is entering its second season on PBS. And truthfully, I think that in many ways that is an excellent example of ways that we can love America and ourselves by having a better relationship with the natural world. Now, I've been familiar with your work for a while now, long before you became the host of this show. But I'm curious, how did you come to hold this job telling the story of America's outdoors for PBS?
Email, James. I check my email. People should do that. Sometimes there's a job in there. Some things go to spam. You got to check your spam. You just got to have a routine. And yeah, sometimes you find some money. It's like money in your couch, where you're like, oh, look, what's going to, there's a freaking job in my inbox. Look at that. So it was pretty simple in the mechanical sense. I got word from my agent that PBS was putting together a show called Outdoor America. It is now called America Outdoors. Radical retitling. And they needed a host. And as the early days, they hadn't shot anything, they hadn't fully defined it. And so this host would also have some say in shaping the show, and it would be built somewhat around who this person was. And so I pitched myself on a Skype call with a production company. I was traveling, as I often do. I was in Palo Alto giving a talk at Google, of all places, like the farthest from the outdoors. And but my pitch was, I grew up in the outdoors. I mean, I had a house, but I grew up camping and hiking and riding my bike all the time. I was a Boy Scout. My mom was a Sierra Club member. She used access to the outdoors to help give me access and opportunity and avoid some of the strains and stresses of the neighborhood that was getting more strenuous and more stressful with crack cocaine in the 80s in DC, murder capital, DC. That's when I lived there. And it goes in cycles like a lot of cities do. So our number was up and we were going through it. And so my mom was like, let's get out of here. You can't be hanging out on the street. That's not outside enough. Hang out in the woods instead. Nobody trying to ask you to hold a bag of whatever over here. So that's where it began in my life, and it has always been a component of my life, but it waned as I got older and got into the computer thing and the politics thing. I always kept a tether. Even as I lived here in New York, I took up surfing as a New York City resident, as a Brooklyn resident. That's not common. I bike all over the city, even as I visit. I'm on the city bike, just weaving and bobbing, and got over to the High Line the other day. I was like, oh, I love finding that. But the truth is that it was not a major part of my life. And the show gave me an excuse to kind of restore some missing piece of myself. And I knew some stories I wanted to put in there, and I was open to others. And I knew it'd be meaningful to have Black person hosting a nature show and an outdoor show. Now there's like 50 of us. It's like it's a season. You got the Black Forager on Instagram. You got your Black Water Project. You got Human Footprint, right? Shane. You got Christian Cooper, our birder brother out here on Nat Geo. It's like, how many Black people are there in nature? Do they all have TV shows now? We just went from 0 to 100, but we've been out in these spaces. Leah Penham is writing about this stuff. You're writing about this. Like, I'm kind of joining a longstanding tradition, and it's been really exciting.
Well, I got to tell you, it's been great having you being part of this space. And I think one of the things that I really love most about your show is that it's not about being Black in the outdoors. Okay, it's about the outdoors from a Black person's perspective. And I think that you beautifully navigate the balance, of literally being able to have a conversation about the outdoors, without shying away from the equitable disparities of access, and the things that we don't always talk about when it comes to being in the outdoors, when it comes to race, ethnicity, the sovereignty of Native people, climate change, all these different things. And truthfully, I think that's actually a refreshing way to do this, because most programs don't do that. They look at it with the presumption that, oh, everybody's part of the outdoors, everybody can have an opportunity to do this. But you do it in such a way that I think that is opening a door to people to realize things that they might not have realized before. How do you do that?
Very sneakily, brother. Very sneakily. I'm glad that you perceive the show that way, first of all. So thank you for seeing all that, because we put all that in there. Sometimes you make a dish and people don't taste all the ingredients. They're like, this cookie is sweet, but do you taste the molasses? Do you taste the clove, the chocolate chips, the bitterness? And not everybody's palate is able to pick up on these things. They're just happy to have a sweet thing. And we don't want to be so subtle that it's only for the most deeply perceptive, culinary tongue. But we don't want to be so heavy-handed that you're just like, there's a lot of ingredients. What am I eating? And they don't recognize it's a cookie. So there is a balance to that. And I know you have a well-developed palate, but I've heard from so many people who are not writers and speakers about nature and access, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And so we slip history in there. We talk climate. We talk all these things you're talking about. And how do we do it? I think we do it for so many reasons. One is I have a lot of experience talking to a lot of different types of people, and I have a lot of experience expressing myself in so many different media for so many years. It's the 10,000 hour thing in part for my piece of this. I have so many reps in the game. This book helped. 10 years of stand-up comedy helped. Working for The Onion for 5 years and The Daily Show to help relaunch that with Trevor, that helped. Being on countless panels from age 12 to now 46 years old, and 34 years in the panel game, right? Just fielding questions and navigating, emceeing. I've emceed every type of gala that there is. Fundraisers for nature groups, for Black women's groups, for tech groups. I've traveled the whole planet multiple times, making people laugh, interviewing, being interviewed. So there's just a lot of relational storytelling that I've been a part of that I sometimes underestimate. And I have a lot I can pull from to be able to connect with people. And this show is about people. It's actually not about the outdoors. That's the deepest non-secret of the show. It's easy to call it an outdoor show because outdoors is in the title. And it's got really pretty drone shots. But every story is about a person and their connection to nature. We're not talking about the bird. We're not talking about the river. We built a whole episode about a river, but every segment was about people connected to that river. And so we can talk about all of these other topics because they're a part of these people's experience and lives. And where it goes from just me and whatever skill I have to the structure and the team is the stories we choose. I have some say in that, but I'm not in charge of that completely. It's too big for one person. So the production company, Twin Cities Public Television, and to some degree PBS at the national level are all contributing to, okay, well, who are we going to put on the camera? And it's my job to get them to reveal themselves on camera, but it's a producer's job and a researcher's job to know that they have a story to share to begin with, and to put something together from a comprehensive perspective. So we're aired New Mexico last night, and we're on the Rio Grande with Louis Hina, Tisuk and Zuni, tribal member, with the Tiwa Kitchen, with the Pataus Pueblo. We're turkey hunting with Oren and Katie. We're with the, I just realized this right now. This is the first episode. So half of our episodes feature Indigenous stories. But this one episode, half of our segment features Indigenous stories. I just realized that right now. And it wasn't like, this is the Indigenous episode of America Outdoors. It just like, wow, it happened. And there are kids in one, and chefs and cooks in another, and a river guide in a third. But when you focus on the people, not the issue, it's a softer way in. And when you ask someone to share their story, it's not a talking points thing, and it's not a white paper thing. It's not an argument in that area. And I get to learn. I go hunting in Arkansas in last week's episode. No, hunting in New Mexico. I went shotgun shooting in Arkansas, and we shot it in that order so I could get trained up, because I never fired a shotgun. Well, one time at a range in Vegas as like a bachelor party thing. That was not real shotgun shooting. This was out there moving things in the woods. Oh, that's real shotgun shooting. So I got trained up in Arkansas by an Olympian. And then I go to New Mexico, and spoiler alert, the turkeys ain't show up, because they knew John Wick was coming. They heard, they got this boy got trained in Arkansas. He ain't messing around. He's finna have some lunch. So now I'm getting real digressed on your question, but we put all those things in a certain way. We're not putting anything in. We are drawing them out of the people who are living them. And so the casting of this is part of the real secret of the show, or the real key. It's not a secret, but the real key.
I really think that what makes this work is that it is very human focused. You talk about people's relationship with the outdoors and what the nature of their love and appreciation for the place is, but it is indeed a human experience. I'm really curious, relative to season 1 and season 2, are they appreciably different at all? Did you take the exact same approach, or did you learn something in season 1 that you might have changed or augmented for season 2 to give us a different experience from a viewing perspective?
Yeah, I learned nothing. No, I don't really. It was perfect in the beginning, and it's just the same, same flaws. Learned a lot. There's so many more that we need to have when I see you in Madison, maybe we can talk in person about all the things I would love to adjust. I'm a very critical person. And actually, I spoke with my father-in-law just today. He called. He had tried to send, this is a 77, 78-year-old man. He's like, I wrote out this email, but it didn't go through. And I got a message back from Mailer Demon. And then it said, contact the postmaster. And I'm like, that can't be right. And I thought I'd been hacked. I was like, man, I love you. If you just read a modern like tech error, but read it as a 70-year-old, like when the email bounces back and it says contact the postmaster, what does that even mean? That's a crazy thing for a computer to tell a person to do. So love to Gary. He thinks it is so much that my personality comes through much more this season, which was nice to hear, because that was a goal. We tried in this season to step up the cinematography further. I was really happy with what we did in season 1. I think we pushed it more in season 2. There's definitely a lot more drone action. And that's credit to the camera team. And a little bit to me having to drive a lot to be in the drone shot. It's a technically challenging ass show to make. Just real quick, like I have to interview people, I have to do these stunts, I have to drive, and operate rafts and firearms and all these things. I don't do all this every day. You know, I know how to ride a bike, I know how to walk, I know how to hike, I can start a fire reasonably, but no one can do all these things unless they just live this life full time, and then you're not also on Zoom, you know. So we wanted to improve, we wanted to bring more of my relationship to the audience through like straight to camera monologues. We discovered that accidentally in the first season when I just did something off the cuff, and a producer was like, "Hey, when did you write that?" And I was like, "Just now." And they're like, "That's not normal. Can you do it again?" And I did it. "How'd you do it again?" "Well, because it was in my head." Like, it was me. It was just me. And so they were like, "Can we schedule that to some degree and kind of work it into the format?" What we kept is the premise of a diverse set of people deeply connected to nature as a way into understanding, you know, the country. We also took a shift in some of the types of stories. We were explicit about wanting mental health and nature as a place for healing. And so there's stories of people with substance abuse disorder, there's stories of foster kids, there's stories of veterans with PTSD, there's stories of people with physical injuries and recovery. So all kinds of recovery stories. We kind of stumbled into that in season 1, and it was a particular like mandate in season 2. And so you see a lot more of that. That's some of the hopes. And the jury's out for me on if we achieved it, because I haven't seen the final version of all of them. I don't really see the final version until it airs, but I hope so. I hope it's better.
Well, I will tell you that I've really enjoyed the episodes of season 2 that I've seen, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. And I'm going to have to apologize to the audience because we're almost 5 minutes to closing time, and I have not asked for a single question from the audience. If there's anything that anyone would like to
Boo!
know,
Boo! Off with his head.
well, someone needs to
Cancel
put me in my
James.
place. If
Cancel
anyone
James.
has a question that they'd like to ask our guest, please put it in the chat. But I really would like to know, and you've kind of answered this, but I'd like to get a very explicit answer to this
Sure.
question. What do you want people most to come away with when they see this program? What is it about America Outdoors with Baratunde Thurston that you think is the most significant, most important takeaway message?
The most significant, most important takeaway message from America Outdoors is we are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. Dudley Edmondson inspired that when my time with him in Minnesota in the first season. You know him, of course. And we've that a saying like that kind of comes up in every episode. Every indigenous tribal person, national member, nation member says something like that. When you heal nature, you heal yourself. Like this lack of separation, the non us and them. Once we can conceive of ourselves as greater than ourselves, then we can be selfish and benefit us all. And we are used to, I think, starting down that path with humans. To go, we should erase these lines between people. They're not really serving us very well. It turns out we're all just one species. But we got to go well beyond that. We're just one. In the sentence sooner. We are one. And we cannot be without this natural world that we have so deeply severed ourselves from in our orientation, in our language, in our economics, in our habitat, in our daily rhythms. We have just erected so many borders between us and the rest of ourselves. We be that trees, waterways, amphibians, reptiles, birds, like all of it. We're connected to all of it. We're all just freaking like atomic surfers on the waves of a cosmic explosion that popped off 15 billion years ago. I just learned that recently. I just learned in a formal sense from this astronomer that all the energy in the universe was there at the Big Bang. No more, no less. The exact same amount. And we're just cruising. We're just, hey, we're just sailing through the cosmos. That's wild, man. So we think we're special because we have a sense of self-awareness, and we can articulate our specialness. And we got these thumbs, and we're like, oh, we have thumbs and voices and self-concept. We have theory of mind, therefore we're special. But we're just like the dust. And the sooner we can recognize that that tree is us, that that river is us, then the sooner we will take care of us, take care of ourselves. And we can stop this false dichotomy of it's the environment versus the economy. There is no economy with no environment. There's no us with no environment. So we got to re-embed ourselves into that circle of life, into that web of life. And that's the biggest thing that I will want people to take away from this series. Another contribution to that lesson. Definitely not the first. Definitely not the last. But in my own way, this is a way that I have found to add to that story.
Awesome. Well, Baratunde, thank you so much for joining us. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have you here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And for those of you who are in Madison, I definitely want to encourage you to join us for the 2023 Jordan Public Lands Lecture on October 5th. It is a live free event, an evening with Baratunde Thurston. So please put it on your calendars and please join us. Also, to put in a very selfish plug, if you're in the Atlanta area next month, at the end of this month, at the very beginning of next month, we'll be hosting another screening of our film, Black Waters, Brotherhood in the Wild, which is a story of our adventure as Black men in the Gates of the Arctic National Park while fly fishing. So if you are inclined, please join us for 3 free events in Atlanta, Georgia. Again, I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. And also wanted to remind you that author discussions on the Joy Chip Reading Project are made possible thanks to the support of the Schleck Family Foundation, the National Geographic Society, and the National Park Service in partnership with Together Outdoors and the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. I hope you'll join us again next month, and until then, keep reading. Good night, and we'll see you next time.